So we are finishing up this series on Who Can I Trust, and we've been taking a look at the life of Jonah in the Old Testament. Old Testament prophet, lived somewhere around 750 to 800 BC. And the thing that impresses me about Jonah's book is this letter that he writes, is how it starts with God and how it ends with God. Because Jonah's words and Jonah's story is really about who God is and how much we need God. In fact, that's why we decided to finish up with this idea of what do you do when you realize that your life and your efforts and the things about your life, they're just not enough. We all face this. We all have to deal with this. Your preparation, our tendency as human beings is to want to be enough. To make sure that I can take care of things. I remember talking to a man who had a lot of issues and struggles and as he went through life. But one of the things he said is, I always wanted to make sure that I took care of my family. So there's this strong desire to say, but I want to be enough. I need to be enough. And we are attracted to people and things and maybe programs and self-help things that are always aimed at saying how you can be enough, how you can be adequate, how you can equip yourself better to take care of everything that you face and everything that comes in life. And yet, just like Jonah, we are constantly running into things that we can't fix. We're running into things that we realize, I don't know how to deal with this. Or maybe you've been going through this lately. You're running into things where you say, I really don't know what's over the next horizon or what's around the next turn. I thought I did. I thought I could plan in a way that would be, that would equip me in that way. But I can't. I just don't know what to do with those things. And Jonah's life and the story of Jonah here in this book is always about the fact that God was the one who was enough for Jonah. And Jonah would never be enough, but he reflects the struggle that we all have in wanting to be enough. In fact, I put this in your outline. This will pop up on the screen also. I decided, I said, I'm just going to look at a few things, and you might come up with a few more of how Jonah, in some areas, was not enough for certain things as you go through the first 3 chapters. And I thought about it very first. Jonah realized that his fleeing to Spain was not enough to escape the call of God upon his life. God made that very clear. So he picks up from where he is. He decides, I'm not going to Nineveh as God asked me. I'm going to the other side of the world as he understood it, to run to Spain, get on a boat and take off. And I'm going to flee. And you know what? I can get away from this. And my effort will be enough. And instead he finds that not at all. God still was there before he got there. And God's call upon his life was still very real. I thought about how his disconnecting in the bottom of the boat, because that's what he does, and the sailors find him, the captain finds him in the bottom of the boat when the storm comes. It was not enough to silence the fears that the storm caused. The people on the boat, those Phoenician sailors, they were just consumed with the fear of it, and they didn't understand why Jonah wasn't consumed with it. I thought about how his giving up, quitting, perishing, deciding it's inevitable, I'm going to die, there's nothing I can do about it, throw me overboard, let me be swallowed up by the seas, how that was not enough to stop God's salvation in his life. God still had decided to rescue Jonah, to continue to teach him, continue to push him forward to what he had made Jonah for and what he had called Jonah to do. And even though Jonah may have quit and given up, it was just not enough to stop what God was going to do. I wonder how many people are here today or maybe watching online that are sort of in the same place. Maybe, it's so confusing. You're not sure what's going to happen. I don't know if it's job. It could be, marriage with your kids. It could be the politics, of the day, that you just feel like, I just feel like giving up and quitting. I just feel like giving in. And maybe like Jonah, just saying, it's inevitable. It's going to all end in disaster. And you don't realize that no matter what it is, it's not enough to stop God in his work of trying to rescue us. That instead, by turning to him, we could still find what we're really looking for. Or how in Jonah's story that his merciful rescue by God, Jonah's merciful rescue, was not enough actually to cool his temper. He was still angry at the Assyrians. He still wanted God to judge the Assyrians. They were so wicked and they were so cruel, and it had affected Jonah and his people for so long that Jonah would not let go of this idea that God, you must punish them, you must destroy them. And I thought about how Jonah's stubborn anger was not enough. His anger was not enough to actually bring remedy, a solution to the city of Nineveh, to the people of Nineveh. Actually, in your outline, Nineveh is spelled wrong, so it should be an EH at the end. So it's not enough to fix my bad spelling sometimes, right? And it wasn't enough for Jonah to do that. And so many times, you and I run into it. We're looking for someone to make us enough. In fact, we even look to God a lot of times. A lot of people do this. They say, God, can't you make me adequate for everything? Can't you make me capable of dealing with everything? And the answer is no. I know you go like, what? That's not God's goal. That's not God's plan. Because if you were adequate for everything, if you could handle everything, why would you need God? Why would you look to Him? But God instead forces us to run head on into, as He did with Jonah, our own limitations, our own shortcomings, our own failures, our own inside of us, our insecurities that we don't really want to deal with, that we want to somehow fix and put in place and then be able to say, those will never come back again. And yet they keep popping up because of our need for God Himself. This is the story from beginning in the Bible all the way to the end of the Bible. You see it in Genesis, the same story that's there. You see it at the end of the Bible, the same story that's there. You look in the New Testament at the life of Paul, and Paul talks about, in and of himself, looking at himself and realizing that there's something inside of him that causes him not to believe and to do the things that he should do, or to do the things that he knows that he should not do. And Paul is having to come to grips once again as he grows and he learns and he moves forward of his need for God in his life. And he will never get away from that need. And actually what he's really looking for, and he doesn't realize it, most of us don't realize it, as I'm actually looking for a God who is adequate for all of those things, who understands those things. He knows the future. He sees what's coming ahead. Whatever you're going to face, listen, God is the one that we look to for answers and to help us and to move us through, and ultimately for God Himself to conquer and deal with all of those things. And this is Jonah's story all the way through. So if you've been with us, you know that Jonah was supposed to go. He's thrown in the ocean by the sailors at his request because he says this will stop the seas from raging. He's swallowed by a great fish that God sends. It says that God appointed the fish. He chose ahead of time that this fish would be there for this time and for this reason. It takes Jonah, the second chapter is just a wonderful part of Jonah's prayer, his brokenness, his realizing that as he thought it was all over with, and as Jonah thought, it all perished, my hope was gone, and there I was, that God was the one who rescued him. And then last week, Jonah actually going back to the city of Nineveh, he goes back and he actually proclaims the message. And if you even look at Jonah's proclamation is inadequate. There's no way that you go and say, Jonah goes in and says, look, in 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed. And that's pretty much what his message was. There's no way that you would look at that and say, wow, look at what Jonah did as far as causing this huge group of people in Nineveh, this large city, to repent and to say what we've been doing, how we've been living was evil, wicked, corrupt, and we are so sorry. Maybe God Himself will rescue us. There's no way. This was something. Now, was Jonah a part of it? Absolutely. But there's no way that Jonah could say it was because of me and what I did. In fact, Jonah doesn't even, he's not even passionate about the message because he doesn't want them rescued. He wants to see judgment upon them. And let me read for you. These are the last couple of verses in chapter 3 and then chapter 4, which is very short, because it's a great setup. The king of Nineveh in this huge city. He actually repents also. And in the end of chapter number 3, again, this is what he says. This is the king of Nineveh. And this is from the New American Standard. I know this is, we've been using the New Living, but New American Standard is a real literal translation of the Bible, the actual words. And I think you're going to see some interesting things there that, as opposed to when they try to say this is what that actually means. Here's what he says. King of Nineveh says, "Who knows? God may turn and relent and withdraw his burning anger so that we will not perish." So he's banking on this idea that this is our only hope. It's the only possibility because we can't fix this. We don't want destruction. Maybe God will do this. In verse 10 it says, when God saw their, say this with me again, when God saw their what? Yes. He saw actions that backed up what they were saying. He saw them act this out. When he saw their deeds, that they turned from their wicked way, then God relented concerning the calamity which he had declared he would bring upon them, and he did not do it. And here's what it says in chapter 4. It says, but it greatly displeased Jonah, and he became angry. He prayed to the Lord and said, "Please, Lord, was not this what I said while I was still in my own country? Therefore, in order to forestall this, I fled to Tarshish, for I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger, abundant in loving kindness, and one who relents concerning calamity. Therefore now, O Lord, please," listen to Jonah, "please take my life from me. Just kill me now. If you're not going to destroy them, after I went and I said you were going to destroy them, if you're not going to do it," last week we talked about that, I think this was incredibly embarrassing for him, and it just added to his anger and to his frustration. He says, "Please take my life from me, for death is better for me than life." The Lord said, so do you have good reason to be angry? Now, God is going to do something with Jonah, and I think he does it with us too, if we'll be honest. God is going to try to come in and reason with Jonah. And it's not just reason in the sense of words. I'm just going to explain some things to you, and God does that. And most of us, realize that's really important. But in this part of Jonah's life, God has got an illustration for him also. He's going to reason with him in some actions and some things that take place to try to enforce in him this idea of who God is and yielding to God's plans and God's desires. And in doing that, what Jonah would be doing would be yielding to the fact that if he's going to be adequate, if he's going to find the answers to the struggles that he's going through, whatever they are, I'm going to find them through God. If I don't look to him, then I'm not going to find what I'm looking for. And again, let me just say, there are a lot of people that are religious, a lot of people who are believers, they're Christians, they follow Jesus, and they fall away from doing this. Somehow they get the idea, listen, we're all like that, I'm like that also, the idea that now I'm adequate. Now I can deal with everything on my own without God. And most of the time we don't even realize that we've slipped into this idea, just like Jonah. Jonah's illustration in this reasoning is not just for him. It was for Israel in his day also. And for us, it's for us in our day to recognize how much we need and how much we need to look to God if we're going to understand, if we're going to move forward with him as he does things in life. So he's not, this is one of the reasons that some scholars will look at this and talk about this story, this book, as like a parable because of the illustration that's there as well as the explanation when God reasons with Jonah. And as you see the story, you'll say, yeah, I see why they would think that way. So here's what he does, the next two paragraphs. Here's what he says, verse number 5. It says, "Then Jonah went out from the city, and he sat east of it. There he made a shelter for himself, and he sat under it in the shade until he could see what would happen to the city. So the Lord God appointed," and very pointed in the language that God decided to do this, he chose a plant. And it grew over Jonah to be a shade over his head, to deliver him from his discomfort. And Jonah was extremely happy about the plant. But God appointed, say it with me, he appointed next this is where, some people say this book should be not Jonah and the whale, but Jonah and the worm. Because even though the worm is not seen, and the worm is so small, it may be a bigger part of the story than even the great fish that he brought. So God appointed a worm when dawn came the next day, and it attacked the plant, and it withered. When the sun came up, God appointed, here we go, a third thing God appointed. He appointed say it with me, a scorching east wind. I like this because when I was younger, a friend of mine, when he got his first car, he got a Volkswagen Scirocco. Anybody ever remember Scirocco's? Okay, nobody remembers. That really says how old I am. This was after Henry Ford. So anyway, he got a Scirocco, and if you know what Scirocco is a word that's used in the Mediterranean area for a scorching east wind, a Scirocco, and that's why they named the car that way. It just burns its way through. And this is what comes after him, is this scorching east wind, and he sent it to beat down on Jonah's head. Maybe he was losing his hair, I don't know. But this heat and this sun is going to beat on his head so that he became faint, and he begged with all of his soul to what? You ever been there? I can't take this anymore, God. This is so uncomfortable. I don't like this. Just take my life, saying, death is better for me than life. So I decided, since he did an illustration, I'm going to try my own illustration of this. So he goes east of the city. So on your side, east would be over here, right? And he decides, I'm going to build a shelter. Now, God has already told him, listen, God's already told him, I'm not going to bring destruction on the city. But he'd gone in and he had said it would be 40 days. So he took 3 days to walk around the city. God instructs him, he's not going to do it. Maybe this is another day or two. So he's still got about 35 days maybe left, right? And so he decides, I'm not going to miss this show. I want to see this destruction, because he wanted it. And even though God said, I'm not going to do it, Jonah, you misunderstand. You don't recognize who I am, and it's my plans and my intentions that you need to get in contact with and you need to work along with. So Jonah goes and he builds himself some sort of shelter. So he's decided, I'm going to set up so that I can watch this, firework display, or however God decides to do it. In fact, I brought, here's more of my shelter over here. I decided, I don't know what Jonah would have done. I'm sure he would have actually done a better job than this, but here's my shelter, and he builds something to kind of protect himself, because you don't want to be sort of just, out in the heat out there. And he builds this and he sets up, let me see if I can, need to move that a little bit, or I'm going to be very uncomfortable. And he decides, okay, this is it. And so Jonah's just sitting there, just waiting. Day after day, I'm going to just wait. It's coming. God's going to destroy the city. I want him to. And I'm going to sit here stubbornly until he actually does. And he waits, and he waits, and he waits. And then in the midst of his shelter, his own man-made shelter, his own design, what he has put together to, again, protect his life and be adequate for himself, God does an amazing thing. God appoints, he sends, he plans on a plant, a vine, to pop up. And here's my plant. I don't know how I'm going to put this on here. There it is. And this represents the vine. Can you see that? Does that work? And this vine pops up, so it's green, it's alive. It wouldn't be like his shelter made out of all kind of things that he would find at the place. And this plant pops up, and it becomes even more of a comfort for him. It eases his discomfort, because the sun was beating down on his head, and this plant pops up, and he loves this plant. What a wonderful plant, just popped up in a day. Most people who study this and look at it say it's probably a castor bean plant. Anybody know what a castor bean plant is? I don't know either. But it's some kind of vine that pops up, grows very rapidly. And you might, if you're a person that says, I don't believe all that stuff, you might just say, well, that could happen. Sure, you're right. It could. There are plants like that. But it's kind of amazing, isn't it, that it pops up at this time and it covers his head, and he falls in love with this plant. Oh, this is just the most wonderful plant, you know. It's shielding my head. I'm having to sit here and wait. I'm waiting for this destruction, and now it's just not nearly as hot on me. But then the next morning, God had appointed a worm, some sort of, I don't know how big it was. I don't know what part of the plant that it bit. But this worm is appointed by God to come and bite the roots or somewhere down the stalk of the plant, and this vine is gone. And the next morning, what happens is now the sun just beats down on his head. His discomfort level has been raised, right? It's worse. And not only that, but God appoints this strong east, hot, Scirocco type of wind to come in, just make it worse on him. I mean, it's just blowing on him, baking his head and his brain. All along, God trying to show Jonah what he does, what he has constructed, what he has planned, how he thinks he's going to fix things. It's never adequate. It's never enough. It won't do it. What he's looking for is not going to be accomplished by his own efforts and his own plans. Man, what a lesson. You ever think that the things that you do are going to accomplish what you want? I mean, they're ultimately going to fix it, and you're going to ultimately all of a sudden say, man, my life is satisfied, I'm happy, everything is good, and I owe it all to who? Me. I did it. I made it all happen. The problem with that is our real problem in life. That is our self-centered sin inside of us that rejects our need for God and our dependency on Him and the obligation that we should have to Him because we are His creation. He made us. He is the one that determines the path of our life. I'm not saying that what we do doesn't matter and it doesn't have an effect. Of course it does. But you and I have the chance to trust God and put our hope in God through life. And if we don't do that, whether you're a follower of Jesus or you're not, if you decide not to do that, you just wake up and end up in frustration because it does not work the way you thought it was going to work. It didn't happen the way you wanted it to happen. And this is why so many people will show up. I mean, I talk to people all the time, and they'll say, well, where is God when, right? Because it didn't work out the way I wanted it to work out. Here's what I decided was the best thing. Where is God? As if it's God's job to make things happen the way you want them to happen. Anybody feel uncomfortable? I do, just to let you know. I feel uncomfortable because I struggle with it just like you do, whether or not I'm really putting my hope and my trust in God. The plant fades. Jonah's sitting there. And my wife reminded me, a month or so ago, we were in San Diego, actually in the northeast part of San Diego, in Santee, where my daughter and son-in-law and a little 6-year-old and now a newborn is there also. 2 sisters. So the little 6-year-old, we have her. We're trying to, before the baby's born, keep her busy and happy and everything else too. So we go out for a walk in this part of San Diego, headed toward a place to eat breakfast. It's about a 20-minute walk, maybe a little bit more. And it's really hot. In fact, the northeast side is really hot. I know that Houston is really hot, but the temperature is actually higher there. It just doesn't have the humidity, but it can bake your brain, just to let you know. So we've gone through this park that they've built, a brand new park, and they have disc golf and all these things. We've eaten breakfast. Now we have to come back. And now it's gotten hotter, right? The temperature has gone up. And as we're coming back, she has decided this discomfort of having walked through this park, and there's a stretch where you're walking through the sun with no shade, is just unbearable. And we were laughing because, you can laugh, and she will one day, because she's just like, oh, as if we could fix it. And, we're both pushing through and saying, listen, the only fix for this is to get back to the house. We just got to keep going. And so she does, as a 6-year-old, what we might do, she just is willing to express it. She actually just plops down on the sidewalk in the sun, right? As if that's going to make it better, and said, it'd be better if I just die, right? You ever felt like that? She's just going to tell you, oh, I hate my life. She's saying all these things. She's very, very expressive. And we're going, okay, I understand. I know how you feel, but this is not going to help. And no, Grandpa is not going to pick you up and carry you because he's not capable. He will die if he does this. And, it's not going to happen. And there's just nothing that we can do except, kind of try to encourage her and try to keep her going. And eventually, we work our way back and she gets home and she forgets all about it. But it's the only thing that you can do. But we laugh because we feel that way. We think that way sometimes. In fact, some of us even say things like that, right? I think God understands. I think when you go and, have you ever done it? I've done it before. God, maybe it'd just be better, to just end it all, if it was just over right now, because it's so difficult. And I just don't understand. I just don't know what to do. And that's where you're at the end of your rope, and at those points where you're at the end of your rope, there's nothing to hope in and to trust in except God himself. It's not a bad place to be because God is adequate. He can handle those things. God has not given up on us. He has not quit. This is why I know that I push a lot of times. People don't like it, and they talk about, needing to love themselves. And I say, that's not your struggle. It's not loving yourself. Your struggle is not understanding how much God loves you and relying on that even when you don't like yourself or you're really struggling with yourself. That's the answer that you're looking for because you are never adequate to handle all the struggles of your life. Never. We never have been. We weren't made to be. Only God himself has that kind of power and ability to control things. So then he does this. He says, listen, Jonah, listen to me. And here's what he says in the next paragraph. And here's his explanation at the end of this illustration to try to help him grasp what God is trying to teach him and to tell him. Then God said to Jonah, do you have good reason to be angry about, this time to be angry about what? The plant, the vine that grew up. He's taking his eyes with Jonah off of take your eyes off of Nineveh for 1 second and all the people of Nineveh that I understand that you hate and you feel very, justified in your hatred because of who they are and all the things that they've done. But do you have good reason to be angry about the plant, the vine that was over you? And Jonah said, here's what he says, I have good reason to be angry, even to death. This sounds like my granddaughter, right? Yes, I do. Don't try to convince me of anything different. You better believe I have good reason. That's how frustrated I am. Verse 10, he says, then the Lord said, you had compassion on the plant for which you did not work and which you did not cause to grow, which came up overnight and perished overnight. In other words, it was so temporary. This vine was so a one-day wonder that it wasn't even anything to hang on to. So you feel like you're justified in this, but he says this, he adds in verse 11, should I not have compassion on Nineveh? So the illustration is certainly that Nineveh is a city that's been there a long time. These are people that God created, he gave life to. They've been there a long time. They are much more important, he is saying to Jonah, than the vine that you are all distressed over because it died. He says Nineveh, and then he describes Nineveh, the great city in which there are more than 120,000 persons who do not know the difference between their right and their left hand, as well as many animals. A lot of people will say, how can you believe that city was that big? And I'll tell you, the interesting thing when you deal with science and archaeology is I was just reading where one city that was there by Nineveh. So it wasn't even Nineveh, but it was more of like a suburb of Nineveh. In their excavation, they have found, and this was done at a level where the city was about 100 years older than during Jonah's time. They actually are found inscriptions that the Assyrians had carved that said exactly what the population was one year. It was 64,593. This 120,000 is some sort of rough estimate, right? Maybe to the nearest 10,000. This is about 120,000 there who don't know their left from their right. Now, there are a lot of debate on what that means. This could mean children, who don't understand things of life, and it might have been because he might have been pointing out to Jonah that that's what you're acting like, a 6-year-old. You're not thinking through this very well. That's possible. Or it could mean that 120,000 adults who don't understand who God is and don't understand what they're doing and how bad it is and how the cruelty and the wickedness of what they're doing is going to cost them. I don't know which one it is. But the point of his story is the city is enormous. And God is saying, I made them. I gave them life. They are my creation. And in the scheme of things, listen, they are more important. Of course they're more important. They're certainly more important to God. So is it right for you to be angry over a vine that is up one day and gone the next day, but not be concerned the way I am, God is saying to him, about these people that I want the message to go out to, that I want them to change their ways because I do not want them to perish and be destroyed? Wow. Changes your perspective, doesn't it? In fact, think about it for a minute. We get upset over so many things. I'm not saying they're not important. I'm not saying you shouldn't take care of those things. But there is some sense of what is most important and what is less important, what doesn't matter as much. And the problem with trying to cover every detail and control every detail of what doesn't matter is it is the idea that I can control and fix and I'm adequate to deal with everything there is, and I'm not. There's no way that I am. The only one who can deal with all of those things is the God who made the vine and made the worm to kill the vine and made the scorching east wind to discomfort Jonah in order to try to get his attention. What is it that God's brought in your life that you don't like, you are uncomfortable with? In fact, even as I'm saying this, you're like, I'm not going there. I'm not going to let you lead me there. I'm not going to deal with that. Fine. Don't deal with it with me. I'm not the one who can solve the issues of your life. But think about it for a minute. Isn't it a good idea to go and deal with it with God and to reason with God? And let God say, I brought this into your life to show you something, to help you deal with something, and really to lead you to put your trust in me, the one who controls the details, who understands, the one who gives all people a choice. But God's great compassion means that God is trying to influence that choice because he knows what is best for them. He knows the decision that they should make, and his love and his compassion for them is the most important thing. And if that means I have to go through some discomfort to catch the message, right? Or if I have to go through some real struggles and some frustrations for God to get my attention and to cause me to look to God, to speak to God, to go back and pray to God, to go back to the Scripture itself and say, God, teach me. There's so much that I need to learn, and there's so much in here heart-wise that I need to surrender and look to you, put my hope and my trust in you because you are the only one. Ultimately, you're the only one that I can trust with all the details. He is. He is. What an incredible thing that he calls us to exactly that. That's what Jesus came to do. He came to lead us back to the God that we can trust, The Father that we had lost our trust in, not because of anything that He had done, but because our thinking and our reasoning had gotten off track and we'd become confused and we had chased after something that made us maybe more comfortable, but it was not correct. It was not the way God sees things and the way God understands things. You might be here and you may have been a believer for a long time. Grew up in church, maybe religious. Even a person like that, because I'm one of those people. I've been doing this for a long time, and I'm constantly faced with discomfort and circumstances that God brings that forces me not to rely on myself or say, I can figure it out or I can fix it, but forces me to turn back to God and to look to God and say, God, I have no answers. I don't know how to deal with this. In fact, you're the only one that I know who could possibly deal with this. And it's a wonderful place to go. Or maybe you're here and you're a person, you've fought it your whole life, You've been wanting control your whole life. We all do, but you've just never quite surrendered to the idea that there is a God who loves you, who cares for you. In fact, He was willing to demonstrate it. Even as He demonstrated it to Jonah, He demonstrated it in even a bigger, more powerful way when He sent His Son into the world to live the same kind of life that we live. He faced the same sort of frustrations and struggles and temptations that we face, but He lived a life that was flawless, that was sinless, a life that was acceptable under all the standards that God had set to God, a life that fully was devoted to the Father, so that He could, strange as it may be, so that He could actually give away that life in order to free us and to bring us back to a position of trusting the Father who watches after us. If you've never put your hope and your trust in Him, listen, that's the whole beginning point. It doesn't mean that now you've figured everything out. It just means that you've gone to the one who can teach you and watch after you and who can take you through all the struggles in life and who is trustworthy to guard your life and to hold your life. If that's what you want to do, if that's what you think, that's what I need to do. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, I can't figure it out. I struggle so much trying to understand. It is difficult for me. In fact, even now as we talk, there's so many things in life that are just difficult for me to accept. But the truth is, no matter how difficult and no matter how I've fought to try to control and accept and understand, I've never been able to do it. I've never been able to resolve the issues of my own life. So I want to try something new. I want to trust you. I want to know you. I want you to be the guiding person in my life, the one that I can look to, the one as I struggle that I can pray to and I can talk to, that I can listen to as I go to your word, to the scriptures themselves, and you would speak to me because you love me, and you would teach me how much you love not only me, but you love the people around me, even the people that irritate me, even the people that I think don't deserve your love. The truth is, I have to be honest, I can't say I deserve your love. But for some reason, you offer it. So thank you for Jesus. And Jesus, I open up my heart to you. I ask you to come in and deal with me. Forgive me. Pour out your mercy upon me and through me to other people. All in Jesus' name.